Hello and welcome. To start with this morning, I want to ask you a question, which I will then answer to give you time to think about your answer, and then I want you to discuss it with the people around you, okay? So the question is, what's your favourite hero from a book or a film? And why are they your hero? So what characteristics of that person makes them your hero, okay? So I've got a couple of pictures that relate to my hero. You'll probably guess if we can have the pictures on the screen. Mr. Neil? So the first one, there's no prize for if you can get it first. That is the Batmobile. And the next one is Batman's bike. So, Batman are my favourite superhero films. I don't know if I'm ashamed to admit or not, but I think they're fantastic. I think Batman is quite a cheeky character. He's quite an arrogant character. He's got lots of money. He's not like Superman, where he was born on a different planet and with all his superpowers, and then he works out that he's on Earth and he's got these powers. Batman is very rich, so he's built this empire up, and I think it's quite an interesting concept to think, could that actually happen, rather than being born on a different planet with those powers? Could it happen that if you had that however many £1,000,000 that he's got, that you could build a bike like that and rule the world? So Batman is my favourite hero because he's big, he's strong, he's got loads of cool gadgets, loads of cool stuff, and yeah, I think the films are acted very well. Just have a couple of minutes to talk to people around you. It could be absolutely anyone from a hero, but we're looking at what characteristics of that person make them your hero, okay? So take 2 minutes to do that. Does anyone want to just shout out very quickly what their hero is and why it's a hero? Heather? James Bond. Why is he your hero? You like Sean Connery? Bit of a crush on Sean Connery, maybe. Okay? Yeah, okay. So if you bumped into Sean Connery, you'd probably faint, so he's your favourite James Bond. Fantastic. James Bond's another one a bit like Batman, isn't he? He's quite rich and quite cool. He's quite sleek, isn't he? Always in his suit, and yeah. Any others? Sherlock Holmes. And why is Sherlock Holmes? Yeah, so the power to help. And he feels his calling is to solve mysteries and get to the bottom of what's wrong, doesn't he? And very discerning, very wise, very, very clever. Yeah? Any others? Yeah. Yeah. So actually Christopher Reeve as Superman, almost the actor then had to develop those same powers that his character had adopted, which made him closer to the character in the film. Fantastic. So this morning we're going to be looking at one of God's great heroes. Okay, I think he's, apart from Jesus, possibly the greatest sort of hero in the Bible. So I want you to keep in mind the things that you thought of for what your favourite hero is, and specifically why they were your hero. We're going to listen, assuming the technology plays for us, to this story being told. It's a story of David, a story of David being chosen by Samuel. So I found in our office, I'm a Christian schools worker in the week, so I was in our office and I was thinking, what's a creative way that I can tell this story? And literally, as I walked in, one of my co-colleagues hit play on this DVD and it said, Samuel had been, ears pricked up. And it was this story. So this is a DVD that we use in primary schools. I hope you don't feel patronised by it, but I think it tells the story extremely well. It's got David Suchet as the voice of Poirot narrating it. So have a listen. We've not got any video, but this is our slightly different reading. Hopefully it'll fill you in with the story if you're not so familiar with it, and then we'll dig into the story in a little while.
The teeny weeny true king. God's people had a new land. Now they wanted a king. But God is your king, Samuel told them. He is the one who looks after you best. But we want a real king, they said, one we can see. God knew that a king might not be kind to his people or look after them as well as he would. But God's people didn't care. They wanted a king, and they wanted him now. So God gave them a king. He was called Saul, and he seemed like a good king at first, but he became proud and stopped listening to God. He didn't obey God or love God with his whole heart. Saul can't help me with my plan, God said. I need a king who loves me and will teach my people to love me. I need a true king. God had just the one in mind. Go to Bethlehem, God told Samuel. You'll find the new king there. Samuel's job was to listen to God and tell people what God said. So Samuel went to the little town of Bethlehem. God told Samuel to go to Jesse's house. God was going to choose one of Jesse's sons to be the new king. Jesse had 7 strong sons. Now, in those days, if you were going to be the king, you didn't have to be the richest or the cleverest, although that was always nice. You had to look like a king, which meant you had to be the tallest and the strongest, so you could carry the longest swords and biggest armor and defeat everyone. And it didn't hurt to be handsome either. Samuel asked Jesse to bring him each son in turn. So Jesse brought the oldest, tallest, strongest son. Oh, well, this must be the new king, Samuel thought. He looks like a king, but God didn't choose him. You're thinking about what he looks like on the outside, God told Samuel, but I'm looking at his heart, what he's like on the inside. So Jesse showed Samuel his next oldest, tallest, strongest son. But God didn't choose him either. In fact, God didn't choose any of the 7 sons. Samuel said, "Is that all?" Jesse laughed. "Oh, well, there's the youngest one, but he's just the weakling of the family. He's only teeny." "Well, bring him," said Samuel. Jesse's youngest son came running up, and God spoke quietly to Samuel. "This is the one." His name was David. "He has a heart like mine," God said. "It is full of love. He will help me with my secret rescue plan. And one of his children's children's children will be the king. And that king will rule the world forever." Samuel anointed David's head with oil, which was a special way to show that you are God's chosen king. "You will be the new king one day," Samuel told him. And sure enough, when he grew up, David became king. God chose David to be king because God was getting his people ready for an even greater king who was coming. Once again, God would say, "Go to Bethlehem. You'll find the new king there." And there, one starry night in Bethlehem, in the town of David, 3 wise men would find him.
I think that's just a beautiful way of telling that story. I don't really feel I need to say much more about the story after that. But there's a few little things I just want to dig into before we maybe draw some parallels with the other king that was mentioned in the by Mr. Suchet. So, thinking of superheroes, does the impression we get of David fit the superhero mould that we talked about earlier? And on first thoughts, you think, well, no, not really, because you see superheroes, huge, 6-pack, built like a train usually. They're able to stop a train. And, ultimately David was the runt of the litter, wasn't he? It says that he was just out in the field. I don't know what you want to speak to him for. They didn't even consider lining him up when Jesse lined up his sons. He didn't even bring him out And you kind of think, well, what's the family politics like in that house? And when a man comes to be introduced to your sons and you leave one in the field looking after the sheep and don't even bring him out, it's a little bit disrespectful almost, maybe, isn't it? But David was the king that God chose. And actually the little phrase that I love from this passage is that God looks on the inside, whereas man look on the outside. And what about Samuel? Samuel maybe fits more the Sherlock Holmes mould, where his role, it said, was to understand what God was saying to the people and actually convey that to them. So he was kind of a prophet figure in the society who'd work alongside the royalty, he'd work alongside the king, and he would actually be the person who would almost be the middleman between God and the people. And he was quite an obedient character. If you're looking at his characteristics, he probably was like Sherlock Holmes. He's quite obedient. He almost receives a case from God, and he goes about solving it. So you receive this case, you're going to go and find a new king. And we learn from the Christmas story that we looked at just before Christmas, funnily enough, that Bethlehem, they were sort of saying, "What? Nothing good can come out of Bethlehem. It's a little sort of shanty town. There must be something bigger and better than Bethlehem." But actually, in this case as well, God says to Samuel, "Go to Bethlehem, and you'll find the new king there." And Samuel wasn't afraid when the sons were lined up, these big burly sons that he'd kind of got in height order, to go, God doesn't actually want you to be the king, or you, or you, or you, or you. And actually it's hilarious in the passage, when you look at it, it's from 1 Samuel 16, if you want to have a look at it later, where Samuel, once he's seen all of the sons that have been lined up, where he does say, "Is there any more?" He says, "Well, there's one more there." So he tells the rest of the sons to stay standing. He says, "Stay here," and then Jesse went off to find the other son. I think it's just fantastic that Samuel has that authority and has that closer relationship with God, that he's not scared to kind of give in to the obvious. The obvious answer would be the biggest, tallest, hardest looking son who would probably impress the people and be the king that everyone wanted him to be, and would brandish the biggest sword and brandish the biggest shield. But actually that wasn't God's way. And God chose a child. God chose a child. And how often in church are the children sort of, "Wow, you're not really in church, are you? You're not really a proper church goer until you're 16, 18, 21, 25, whatever the age boundary is in that church." But yet God chooses a child to be the most powerful king, the King David, who, not just in biblical terms, but actually in terms of his history, one of the biggest and most powerful kings that nation has ever seen. God chose him when he was this high. And I think that's a big challenge. I know we as a church here do try and break that mould of church a bit, but I think it should always challenge us that actually our children are the church of today and they're not the church of tomorrow. And actually, if they're next door or if they're in here, that they're immensely valuable and that God chooses the children. And as we, I guess, I just want to draw some parallels really between David and between the other king that was found as a child in Bethlehem. So I've got another video that I just want us to watch from the recent Bible series on Channel 5. Has anyone been watching it? You've watched it, fantastic. And this is about Jesus choosing one of his disciples. So I want you to have in mind that passage, that little verse from the passage. Man looks on outwardly appearance, but God looks on the heart. Okay, man looks on outwardly appearance, and God looks on the heart. So we're going to see what Jesus has to say about that. Okay, so that was Jesus choosing Matthew, as in Matthew who wrote the first book of the best-selling book of all time. And that's how he chose him. those who praise themselves will be humbled, and those that humble themselves will be praised. And I hope that we as a church, that us as people, can be encouraged by that. Because, unfortunately, it's one of those things about this world. There's always going to be someone with more money than us. There's always going to be someone with a nicer car, with a nicer house, that's taller, bigger, stronger, cleverer. There's always going to be someone who's going to want you to be older, who's going to want you to be younger, who's going to want you to be bigger, smaller, blonder, darker, whatever it is. But actually, Jesus isn't interested in that. Jesus isn't interested in that. And it's not that he's not interested in that. It's that he walks the opposite way. And that he wasn't afraid to tackle the authorities, the Pharisee that we saw there going, I wonder what the sins would be of his other followers. He just couldn't get the fact that Jesus didn't care what Matthew had done. He didn't care what kind of a person he was in the past. What he cared about was what was in his heart. Because God looks on the inside and man look on the outside. And for me, I love watching The Voice on TV. Does anyone else like The Voice? It's better than the X Factor, come on. As these competitions go, it's not too bad. And what I like about The Voice is that in the early rounds, and of course you don't know how much this is doctored on TV or how much this is scripted, etc. But the impression that you get, okay, is that the contestants will come in and that the judges will be facing the other way around. And the judges will have no idea who it is that's behind them. And the person that's behind them will begin to sing. And if the judges like what they see, they hit their button, they turn round, and then that's their first impression. So they're not judging people on their stage show or on how much makeup they've put on or how fashionable their clothes are. They're judging them on a singing competition purely by their voice. So we've got a quick clip, just in case you haven't seen The Voice before, to see quickly how it works. So when they hit that button, the chair spins round, and what lights up? I want you. I want you. And what the really good news is, that as true as it was for Samuel and David, it is now. God wants you. He doesn't care how tall you are. He doesn't care how strong you are. He doesn't care how rich you are. He doesn't care if you come from Bethlehem. He doesn't care if you're a shepherd. He wants you. And what's really exciting is that for God, there's no question as to whether his chair is going to spin round. His chair is going to spin round. But what he wants us to do is go and sing our song. And we may have different voices. We may have different styles. Some of us might be jazz singers. Some of us might be heavy metal singers. Some of us might be somewhere in between. And it was so encouraging at the volunteers' meal last night, just to see the amount, and when Michael was starting to read out the different things that people contribute in this place, in this city, in this town, to hear all those different songs being sung, that are sung throughout the week. Whether you sing while you're washing up, whether you sing while you're putting tables out, whether you sing while you're designing flyers, whether you sing while you're helping run youth group. God wants to hear your voice. And all you need to do is let him hear it. So, as the chair spun round, this chair is going to spin round. And on here, I've got little sheets, which in turn on them have a little chair from The Voice saying, I want you. And actually, I want you to encourage you as we sing our last song, if you want to be part of this, if you want to say to God, I want to walk into that audition room, I know that you're going to spin your chair around. I know that you want me, and I want you as well. So I want to invite you, if you'd like to come and grab one off the chair. Let's just pray as we finish. Lord, I'm constantly blown away by the gifts and the talents that you've given to each and every person in this room. Lord, I thank you that we all have a beautiful song to sing, in whatever way, shape or form that happens. And I just pray as we head into this new year, that for some it might need to be a new start, that for some it might be perfectly good to pick up where we left off at the end of 2013. But Lord, I just pray that you will give everyone that certainty this morning that you want them. That you wanted a shepherd thousands of years ago to lead your people, who no one would have expected. And that in turn, you want us. And some of us might not think we're the people that you'd expect to choose. But that's your way of doing things, and that's why we love you. Amen.